Hey guys, welcome. My name is Eureka, your host of the Happy Child series, and today we have with us Dr. Rebecca Branstetter. She is a school psychologist, speaker, and author on a mission to help children be the best that they can be in school and in life by supporting school psychologists, educators, and families. I want to say, like, when I first went on her website and it said thriving, not surviving, I was like, yes, totally in alignment with this series. And just a little bit more about Rebecca. She is also the founder of Thriving School Psychologists Collective. It's an online community dedicated to improving mental health and learning supports in public schools. She's also the co-creator of Make It Stick parenting course, which provides parents of children with special needs tools to build their child's social emotional learning, and the Peace of Mind parenting course to support families during distance learning. She's a mom of 2 daughters and 2 furry husky dogs in San Francisco Bay Area, where I am also from. So thank you, Rebecca, for being with us, and grateful for you to be here.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So without further ado, I have so many questions for you. And I know previously we talked a little bit about emotional regulation and how important this is for children. So could you first define what that actually means?
Yeah, and so during this time period, it's really important that we understand emotional regulation because at the time of this recording, we're all in the back to school mode, and our kids might be having big feelings about either returning to school or returning to their kitchen counter for distance learning. In my case, I have 2 daughters in elementary school, and that's where learning is happening. So there's a lot of big feelings amongst our children, and also amongst ourselves as parents, right? There's a lot of stressors going on, both related to our children and our own, work-life balance or lack thereof, as we're trying to navigate this this pandemic and all these really challenging situations. So I think what's important to know about emotional regulation, and the way I kind of explain it to the parents I work with as a school psychologist, is it's the Goldilocks level of emotions for the situation, right? So, it's not too much, it's not too little, it's the just right level of alertness and energy and your feelings and your behavior for the situation. So I think every parent out there has probably had the experience where their child has a reaction that seems outsized, right? Like I remember really distinctly when my little one was in her 2s, she asked for Raisin Bran, and I gave her Raisin Bran, and then she burst into a puddle of tears. She's like, "There's raisins in it." And you're like, "But that's literally what you asked for." So, there's some age groups in which that emotional regulation is really ramped up, and those toddler years are one of those. And emotional regulation can be challenged, when kids enter adolescence, and there's hormonal things at play as well. So really when it boils down to is emotional regulation is your ability to up or down regulate your feelings in the situation.
Okay, thank you. The question that comes to mind is emotional regulation taught, learned by society, parents?
Yes, that's the short answer. Look, there's some kids who have different temperaments, right? Some kids are even from birth very difficult to soothe. Some kids are easy breezy, lemon squeezy. They are really easygoing temperaments. And so there is a temperamental thing at play. There's also parents have different temperaments. We all have different levels of alertness and regulation and feelings, right? And so often there can be like a match or a mismatch sometimes. If you're a really high-strung kid and you're a really chill parent, you might be like, what is this creature in front of me, or vice versa. So there really is an interplay between genes and environment, right? So we all are sort of predisposed to maybe certain levels of emotional regulation, or how quickly that bounce back factor, how quickly we are bouncing back from things, and kids with anxiety or kids who are highly sensitive, or kids maybe even on the autism spectrum might have lower frustration tolerance, higher levels of alertness for smaller things. So it really kind of depends on the child. But regardless of what kind of child you have brought into this world, there are strategies for helping your children. And a lot of parenting is modeling. And for good or for bad, they are watching us. And they actually are learning a lot about how to manage big feelings from watching us and how we manage our big feelings. And so if we're saying, oh, you need to calm down and that's not a big deal, but then we blow up at the littlest thing too, and they're watching, like, how does mom come back down from being, upset or angry? How does mom react to disappointment? A classic example would be like, you're in the car, there's a ton of traffic or something, and you feel yourself as a parent getting all ramped up and white knuckling or something like that. There's an opportunity for teaching there. If you start yelling and screaming and, getting all upset and things like that, that's actually a reaction that maybe is fine, but then how do you come down for that and be like, wow, I just had a big moment for a little thing. So I'm going to go ahead and take 3 deep breaths right now and reboot. Who's with me? And then you might say out loud, like, wow, I really lost my cool. Have you guys ever lost your cool before? I think I just lost my cool. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell myself that, we're going to get there when we get there. And I feel better now that I told myself that, right? So there's all these tiny moments in the day where parents can be a social emotional coach for their children by modeling out loud how they cope with stress, how they deal with big feelings. There's an opportunity there.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really good point, because it's not what you say, it's what you do, right? Is the whole concept behind modeling, and mostly how children learn, like you have already shared. So you shared one strategy, and I love actually that you said actually verbalizing your process, because sometimes we do it internally, and the child might not know, like, oh, what just happened to mom or what just happened to dad? They seem okay now. But I think verbalizing that process is also so key, and that's such a great strategy. So earlier in our conversation, we talked about the flight or fight or freeze concept. And so can you speak a little bit about that with the porcupine and the turtle?
Well, if only I just happen to have a prop handy. I do. Okay, so I have 50% of the props I need for this. The other 50% live with Elizabeth Sauter, who is also Bay Area, who is a speech language pathologist, who is my co-creator of Make Social Learning Stick, the course for Make Social Learning Stick is her book. And then we have a course together that helps teach parents how to be social emotional coach for your kids, Make It Stick Parenting. So sorry, that was a long way of saying she has the other prop. So when we're stressed, we think of reactions like fight, flight, freeze. There's a fourth one, which is faint, but people rarely do that. It happens. So when you see your child stressed, sometimes they may not have the words to express that, right? They may not know why they're upset. They may get maybe doing distance learning, and they get a math worksheet, and they turn into a puddle of tears. Or a teacher asks a question on Zoom, and they just turn off their screen and start crying, and you're like, what is going on, right? So what we know is that children's behavior is communication. So when they act out or when they withdraw, they're communicating something to us. And that's usually that I'm having a hard time. I am stressed. I don't have the tools to cope with this. They're not going to say that verbally unless they're, maybe a teenager and more like articulate, but they have great social emotional feeling vocabulary. But little ones will tend to do what Elizabeth and I call porcupining or turtling. So porcupining is, I love doing that, where they sort of quill out, right? They get angry, or they like shoot emotional quills at you, like, go away, mom, or maybe they throw things or hit their siblings, or they throw a book, or whatever, some sort of outward display. Now, as a mom, you might want to go hug the porcupine, but they're prickly, right? You can't. I may make it worse. My co-collaborator, Elizabeth, has a turtle puppet. We'll just pretend this is the turtle puppet. This is the sign language for turtle, right? This is sea turtle. This is turtle. Okay. We'll use what we got, right? So turtles, you know, when they're stressed, they may withdraw, right? They may go under the covers. They may stop talking to you. That more like internalizing withdrawal behavior can be a stress response. So whether you have a porcupine kind of child or a turtling kind of child, they're both symptoms of stress. And sometimes you can have a turtle pine, right? They're both mad and withdrawing. But the point is that you really can't do any kind of problem solving with your child if they're being porcupining or turtling. They're in brainstem, which is kind of the stress mode. All of their emotional resources, all of their brain juice, if you will, is going straight to their brainstem. This is something that's from the positive parenting literature, talks a lot about, which is when they're in brainstem, they don't have their frontal lobes online for learning or thinking or problem solving. And it's sort of like, you know, when you're upset, Eureka, and like someone would come in, if they would like go straight to problem solving, you're like, no, like, no, that's not what I need right now. I need you to tell me how bad this is. I need you to be like, I'm so sorry, girl. Right. So we need to lean in as parents with empathy before we start problem solving. If you jump in with what's wrong with the max wish, you know how to do fractions, honey. No, not available. Your children, a teachable moment may not be in the moment because they're stressed. When you have a porcupine or a turtle, your job is not to problem solve why they're porcupining or why they're turtling in that moment. Your job is to co-regulate. Are you familiar with this term? Mm-hmm. Co-regulate is basically you get to be that child's emotional regulation. Mm-hmm. The spooky sci-fi thing about humans is that we match each other's emotions. Within milliseconds, we can detect how someone's feeling, and within a couple more milliseconds, we try to match it. It's spooky. So when I know, it's like sci-fi, right? When your child is porcupining, you can't join the chaos. You can't become a porcupine too. Like, it's just a math problem, right? Because then that's like gasoline on a fire. If your child is turtling, you can't be like, oh man, oh God, there's nothing we can do. Like, you can't withdraw. You need to bring your calm, your adult brain, your emotional regulation to the equation. Mm-hmm. The challenge is our kids can trigger us, meaning when they're blowing up for the 70 millionth time, or they're withdrawing for something you think is not that big, you have to be mindful. And this is where the mindfulness lens comes in, and why you and I are chatting today is because I know we share this vision. You have to have that internal pause button as a parent to be like, okay, I'm going to react, right? You need to check your own anger, frustration, annoyance, whatever it is. And maybe 11 billion things that happen up until that point. And that's the straw, is when your kid loses it because you asked them to brush their teeth or something that seems like a not big deal. And then you get angry. So when you have a child who's porcupining or turtling, it's important to put water on that situation, not gasoline. Gasoline is joining the chaos, and water is saying, oh my gosh, you are having a hard time. Are you okay? Right? When I bring my voice down, it brings your child's emotional regulation back, and nothing gets kids back into that emotionally regulated zone faster than empathy. Mm. Even if you think the problem is not that big of a deal. I mean, imagine you came home and something little happened, but it was the straw that broke the camel's back, and you told your friend like, oh, this happened and it was just awful. And they're like, that's not that big of a deal. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, would that be helpful? No, it would not. Or if you're like, I had a bad day at work, I don't know what to do. And your partner says, let's get on LinkedIn. We'll get your resume sorted and we'll get this. Maybe you just wanted to be like, this has been hard. Maybe you just wanted empathy. Maybe you just wanted to vent, right? Kids are the same way. Sometimes they just need you to see them and say, oh my gosh, you're right. Is everything okay? How can I help?
Mm. Yeah, so actually what I'm hearing you say underneath all of that is like so important for the parent to actually be able to self-regulate before they can even, try to help, regulate their child. And so I love how you brought that mindfulness piece in, because if the parent's not able to do that, then you can't do that for your child.
And the best way that I've found to do this is a mindful activity called the one for me, one for you breath. Are you familiar with this?
One breath for me, one breath for you.
Yeah. So your child is a porcupine right now. Imagine they're freaking out. There's something you've asked them to do. Maybe they're resisting, or they're saying, I don't want to, or they're getting in a squabble with their sibling or something like that. First off is you have to be calm in this situation. If you come in guns blazing, like, oh, you need to do, right, then they're in brainstem. And now guess what? You're in brainstem. The one for me, one for you breath is first you have to take care of yourself as a parent. And I do hand over heart and hand on belly. And I go, this is hard for me. I give myself a little empathy. And then I give one for my kid. Wow, this is hard for her. Right? So it's not she's giving me a hard time. It's she's having a hard time. There's a difference. And you can have a more empathic response if you're thinking about her underdeveloped brain because, she's a child, that she needs help with emotional regulation. It's not that she's giving you a hard time. She's having a hard time regulating. So one for me, one for you is a great way for you to cultivate that internal pause button. One for me. Okay, now I'm ready to move in. One for you. Now my kids, when they see me do this, they're like, oh, okay, something's happening. They're like, oh, this is happening. They're like, you all right, Mom? I'm like, I'm just taking a little, right? But kids are watching. And so then I have seen them, and I haven't sat down and be like, daughters, today's the day. I unleash my PhD skills upon you, and I teach you the power of self-regulation. And we're going to do it one for me, one. But I see them sometimes kind of just taking a little breath. And then I can lean in and be like, oh my goodness, good job. Look what you're doing there. Can you tell me what thoughts are popping through your brain right now? And then they're like, I lost my Harry Potter book or whatever. And then I can hear it. So again, it's bringing that underground to above ground, right? Underground, I'm dealing with my feelings, but I can bring it above ground and model for my kids how to do that. And so that one for me, one for you is a great activity for parents to try on for size. It's free. It takes 12 seconds at most. And it's a really great way to stop and think before you respond so that you can co-regulate with your child.
Yeah, and the word that also comes to mind is self-compassion and then compassion, right, with every breath. So for people who practice mindfulness or have a mindfulness practice, like I'm giving myself self-compassion right now because I'm having a hard time, and then the compassion for the other person or your child, and that they're having a hard time. And I think even those two phrases are very powerful.
They are. And it's amazing how just one breath can really change how you enter a situation when your child's porcupining or turtling. Yeah.
So I want to tackle this question about distance learning because I'm like you in California, and we are still in distance learning, and I am seeing so many kids struggle with this right now. And talk about especially special needs. So like I work with blind children who are blind. So it's like, try getting, all your students who are blind, like on Zoom and participating in a visual platform. And so like this distance education is already difficult, but then you add like special needs on top of that has been so difficult for me as an educator, as well as like many other teachers. So can you talk a little bit about like how you've seen distance learning affect students with special needs, how that's changing?
Yeah, so I think, parenting a child with special needs is difficult. Parenting them when in a pandemic is even more difficult. And parenting during distance learning is really challenging. So basically what I think of it as everything's magnified. So if your kid had a little bit of a hard time with emotional regulation before, they might be having a big time. If they had a little bit of organizational challenge, they might be having big organizational challenges. A little bit of focus issues, wow, that's a lot bigger. So I think that we first, in that self-compassion lens, have to just give ourselves a little bit of grace and say, wow, this is actually just a really challenging time for my child and for me. But I think that the mindfulness piece actually can layer on top of this. So mindfulness, I think, is a great proactive strategy, something to build before the stress happens, but it's also an in the moment strategy that parents can use. And it kind of folds into the gift that I'd love to give to your audience, which is the distance learning survival kit. And in this kit, there are activities for mindfulness, and not every child wants to do deep breathing. So there's different flavors of mindfulness activities that you can try on for size with your child as a way for emotional self-regulation. Mindfulness has been shown to increase focus and decrease stress. So that's a 2-for-1. I also have given the SOS, which is a sensory organized home checklist, if you will. So you can see like, okay, is the environment set up for success, for distance learning, right? And then also there's some scripts that I've given for those moments in which the child is porcupining or turtling, because sometimes we don't know what to say in the moment, right? And so these are like literally things you can say. Like instead of saying, you're okay, which is not very validating, but something we say all the time. And it's done with not with malice, but we just say, oh, you're okay, right? We want to reassure them. But try on for size, are you okay? When you ask questions, sometimes it gets them out of brainstem and inner frontal lobe, because I wait, am I okay, right? Or, you can lean in with, questioning like, what were you thinking about when, you turned off your Zoom, right? And, oh, wait, what was I thinking about? So instead of like, why'd you turn that off? Which sounds judgy, right? So there's some scripts as well. So, there's a lot to unpack with distance learning, but I think that if we peel it back to its essence right now, what's so important right now is emotional regulation. Kids can't learn if they're dysregulated, period, end of story. If your child has ADHD, if your child has a learning difference, these things are going to be even more challenging. So you actually need to double down on the connection and the relationship and the emotional safeness. I would recommend that it's really hard to connect on Zoom, although I feel really connected to you right now, but it's more difficult. We don't have 23 other friends competing for our attention. Parent-teacher conferences might be coming up, and you might say, can we just, problem solve a way to build this relationship, even though it's over Zoom? I know that for me, like, even if there's any teachers out there watching, even when teachers say little tiny things like, oh, I noticed that you have the Harry Potter books, they feel connected. They're like, oh, she notices me. So it really doesn't take a lot for kids to feel connected or noticed, even on distance learning platforms. But as a parent, you have to kind of do a control audit. What's in my control and what isn't, right? So distance learning, that's out of my control. And I don't have control over the platforms or what they're using. But what I do have control over is how I connect with my child. How do I lean in when they're having challenges? Do I lean in with empathy, right? Do I give them tools such as mindfulness, a nice clean workspace that doesn't have a lot of clutter, that's quiet? I know it's not always possible, but to the best of your ability. And then also to have some scripts at the ready for when they are struggling. And sometimes the time for problem solving really isn't in that moment. And so for distance learning, if you're seeing like a habitual challenge of, they're toggling to YouTube or something in the middle of, some task, when they're calm and in a happy place, maybe over dinner, you're having a little ice cream, everyone loves ice cream. You can say, look, I noticed that you end up on YouTube when your teacher's on Zoom. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And you might actually just listen, don't problem solve, just empathize. Like, wow, okay. So, and maybe it's always during math. Well, then there's some clues like, well, maybe they're having trouble in math, or maybe they're bored, or maybe, there's all kinds of things that could be creating that distractibility. Maybe they need more movement breaks. They're getting antsy. Maybe they need something a little more stimulating. So, we can work on fidgets, and we can, get approved ways to have some accommodations and supports. Maybe we need to do some more Go Noodle. Are you guys familiar with Go Noodle, which is like a movement and mindfulness dance breaks? I do them all the time with my kids. By the way, take adult recess, parents out there. It's really refreshing, like from your inbox, like a little break. There's these like crazy little videos where you can go and like jump over a pickle with a moose and like, there's just like really fun little things. They have mindful breathing ones, and they have dance break ones. And maybe your kid, if they're toggling to YouTube, it's because they feel restless. And so they need more movement. Maybe you need to have like earbuds so they can wander and listen. You know, there's a lot of different creative ways, but it's about first understanding what's going on for your kid and not judging them, but just asking them like, what's up? And then partnering with your teacher, just saying, look, just so you know, this is happening. He's toggling to YouTube and we're trying to problem solve at home, but maybe there's some ideas that you have. It's a collaboration. So, you know, we don't have optimal conditions and we got to make the best with what we have been given right now. And we have to be curious, not judgmental, even with our kids, even with ourselves. Why did I get so mad that he went to YouTube? Be curious about that. What did that bring up for you? Oh, I'm afraid that the teacher is going to be, you know, annoyed with me because I can't control my son, or, you know, think about being curious when you have a challenge.
Yes, I love that you bring that up.
Yeah.
Because, you know, in mindfulness, we always talk about like being non-judgmental of whatever of the situation that's going on. And I think questioning is a really great way, questioning without judgment, right? Just with the curiosity, because that allows the openness. So I think a lot of times teachers and even as parents, like if you see your child doing something that they're not supposed to be doing, we automatically, without explaining, we say like, close that, don't do that. But not really explaining like, or trying to understand why that is the case. And so I really like your strategy of bringing it up, not in that moment, but like when things are, you know, when they're happy or when they're neutral, you'd be like, hey, I noticed this, and just trying to understand them, I think is a skill that parents and, you know, and even educators can practice. So thank you for bringing that up. I did have a question for you regarding, do you have a strategy for parents who are also working from home and then all of a sudden now also have to be like, you know, the teacher or the tutor, or making sure that their student is on the, or their child is on the correct Zoom meeting for this class and that they're doing their homework. And then while trying to, you know, work from home and all of, and being in quarantine and, you know, with the fires here right now, you know, there's just so much going on and so much stress for adults as well. Do you have strategies to try to manage that?
Yeah, I invite your listeners to go to RebeccaBranstetter.com. Please post the link because I'm sure Branstetter is not an intuitive, phonetic kind of situation. Will you be able to post the link?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay,
Your link,
great.
your website and your bio, everything's going to be underneath this video, as well as your link to the free gift.
Okay, so on that, you will find a couple of different resources. So one is really geared for parents right now during the pandemic. How on earth do we manage home and school? How do we manage our stress? How do we manage our kids' stress? How do we give ourselves grace? How do we work out these, you know, very pandemic specific challenges? There's a course through an agency called Commune, which is an online wellness organization. And I've just launched a new course called Peace of Mind Parenting that teaches many of these strategies that I've alluded to today about how to cope with your own stress so that you can cope with your child's stress. And then also on that website, you'll see a link to the Make It Stick Parenting course. And that's the other course for really specific for kids with special needs. The strategies actually work for every kid, but the course was designed particularly with kids who have challenges with emotional regulation, kids who have challenges with executive functioning, that planning, organizing, sticking with it and following through stuff. Kids who have challenges with social communication skills. That's really the course where the porcupine features. I love just like sneaking that into the Zoom view. And the turtle, and that's my co-collaboration with Elizabeth Sauter. And if you go to, again, the free gift for you all is at makesociallearningstick.com/survival kit. So there's something for you, there's something for your kids, and really it's both. It's a both and. When you take care of yourself, you're going to be better able to take care of your children during this time. But if you want more like tactical moves on like how to you know, set up your environment for success, or how to cope with your stress and how to balance home and work obligations through a mindful lens, RebeccaBranstetter.com is where I would send your parents to have a look and see which course is right for them.
Amazing. So true too. We have to be able to take care of ourselves in order to show up to be the best parent to your child. Um, so if there's one thing that you would like this audience to remember from this entire interview, what would that one thing be?
Oh, great question. This guy, no. Empathy.
Mm.
The road to problem solving is paved with empathy. Can you do that in post-production above my head?
I'll try.
All right, you work on that with your tech team. Empathy.
Yes, yeah. Empathy, so important. Compassion, self-compassion, all of those things, I think, so important to us, especially right now. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for being with us and sharing all of your wisdom and knowledge. And I specifically really love your scripts. Like, I think we, as parents, we don't know, like, what do I say? And so I think your scripts are super, super helpful. So everyone, make sure you download those. And thank you again.
All right, well, thanks for having me. Bye, y'all.